Good Monday morning-ish, almost afternoon. Welcome to the Monday Build Show. I'm your host, Ben Estrino, and I will be building a awesome PC for somebody locally here. They are looking for a awesome PC for 3D modeling, and also I think a little bit of gaming. So we really focused on the horsepower of the CPU and the RAM, as you can see here. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the build. I'm going to run through the build list, all the parts that are in the build out really quick here. So starting off, we have the i7 13700K. This bad boy's got 16 cores, 24 threads, and has a max boost of 5.4 gigahertz. It's a wonderful processor. Actually surpasses the i9 from the 12th gen series. It does get a little bit warm, so we do actually have a Lian Li Galahad 2 cooler here. So this is the second version of this cooler, which has the addressable RGB fans. It's a 360 millimeter radiator, and it has three 120 millimeter fans. Overall, it's a wonderful cooler, and I've started using these since they were released earlier this year. I think it was like a month or two ago, actually. It wasn't too long ago. And I've had nothing but great praises with these new coolers by Lian Li. So these coolers right here are super awesome, and I really highly recommend them. It also includes a limited 5-year warranty from the manufacturer, which is even better. So if you look at it this way, it's guaranteed to work for 5 years. Can't ask for much more than that. The RAM, we're going to be using the Trident Z5 by G-Skill, which is 64 gigs of DDR5 RAM, at 6,000 megahertz, and it's a CL16. There's 2 sticks in here, so each stick is 32 gigs, and it is Intel XMP ready, which if you're working with DDR5, as I've explained in the past, you want to make sure you're using Intel XMP ready on an Intel platform, and if you're using an AMD platform, make sure you're using the AMD Expo ready RAM. That'll just kind of avoid any random issues, posting issues with DDR5. You can also check your motherboard support page on their website from your motherboard manufacturer website. Go there and check to see what kind of support your motherboard has for what I guess what RAM is supported on the board, or tested and verified to work on the board. You could do that, and you may be able to use AMD Expo RAM on a Intel kit or a motherboard, but I usually just try to avoid that. I target, if I'm working with Intel, I target Intel XMP RAM. Usually you'll always find that it has Intel XMP ready right there on the package, or in the details from the website. Alright, so outside of that, we have the Z590P Wi-Fi motherboard. This is the Asus Prime. It's got all sorts of different options here on the back for USB, as well as USB-C. And then it's got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built into it, as well as lots of features such as M.2 slots. There's 1, 2, 3 of them. So we're going to be filling out one of these slots, which is probably going to be this top slot here under the heat spreader. And then there's going to be 2 additional slots available for extra storage in the future, which, going to storage, we have the 980 Pro by Samsung. So this is the Samsung 980 Pro, which is NVMe, and it's PCIe Gen 4.0. So super fast read-write speeds, which is what we want, especially for somebody who's doing a lot of design. They don't want to sit around and wait for something to load up. This 980 Pro is going to help with the load times and make it super snappy. Now, moving on to the graphics card, which is the Asus Dual, which is just means it has 2 fans on the cooler, but it is a thicker card, meaning it's just bigger with the 2 fans, a little bit bigger fan on each section there, but it's the Asus Dual OC, so it is overclocked out of the box from Asus, and this is the GeForce RTX 4070, which I believe is 192-bit at GDDR6X, and offers 12 gigs of RAM, VRAM. Next, we have the power supply, which is a 1000 watt, because we wanted to make sure we got him enough power, one, for the system, which 1000 watts is more than enough, but we wanted to make sure we got him, you know, I think an 850 would have been fine here, but we did a 1000 to make sure he had enough horsepower if you ever wanted to upgrade in the future. Also, we wanted to make sure, because this card doesn't require PCIe 5.0, but if he upgrades to a bigger card in the future, he will need PCIe 5.0. So this power supply also has PCIe 5.0 ready to go on it. So if you ever upgrades, for example, to a 4090 and he needs that 600 watt cable, this has it already built into it, ready to go. So none of that adapting from the card to the power supply to the power supply cables, excuse me, to the power supply. It'll be a direct connection from the power supply to the card, which is the most reliable way to plug in a PCIe 5.0 600 watt cable without anything melting from the arcing. So always, if you're going to be building with a card that requires the 16-pin 600 watt cable, try to get a power supply that has PCIe 5.0 and plug it in directly from the power supply to the video card. Don't do any adapting. Reduce the amount of failure points that you can in that reach from the power supply to the graphics card. So the least amount of connections you have in between the power supply and the graphics card, the better. That's the way I try to explain it. So this would be ready for future upgrades, which makes it super easy for him. Now, last thing I forgot. Anytime you're doing a LGA 1700 build, you always do the LGA 1700 bracket, which I have here, and then I do also have a GPU bracket as well for the build if we need it. Actually, don't know if this one comes with it or not, the Dual. But if not, I have a bracket here for it. And then we have some black cables for the build that are sleeved to kind of add to the fancy. But all right, let's, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over to a top-down view here. And as always, if you guys have any questions during the build, excuse me. If you have any questions during the build, I always welcome those questions because I'm happy to answer them. As well, you know, with this build or any other build outside of that. So I'm always welcoming the questions. Bring it on. All right, so let's get some of this out of the way. I didn't really talk about the case, actually. The case is a Lian Li Landcool 216, which offers the really nice mesh front and the 360mm AIO installation at the top of the case, because with his line of work, number one, it's going to be a lot of CPU intensive work, which means the CPU is probably going to be the hottest component in the build, and we don't want the radiator on the front pushing that hot air back into the build to be cycled out. So instead, we're going to be putting the radiator at the top, which is normally what I do anyway, but we're going to be doing that specifically for this build because the CPU is going to be the hottest part in the build. And it will, what that will do is make it so that hot air from the CPU is going to be dumped out of the case immediately. So all the hot air is going to be just exhausted right out of the case. And that's what you want to do in a build that's going to be CPU intensive, such as this. That way, any of that hot air is not being recycled through the case. It's just getting expelled right out of the case. But all right, so the power supply we don't need to start with. Oh, good gosh. I think that's like 3 times now that I've dropped it, but that's why I have foam on the table. Don't worry, it's fine. You should see what happens to them when they're shipped. Okay, so I got my tools ready. Let's go ahead and get started. Oh yeah, Micro Center did check this. That's why I was hoping. But here's our Asus Z790 motherboard. Again, it's a great motherboard. It's got lots of features here. We're going to go ahead and get started by taking this bracket off, because we're going to be replacing it with a Thermalright LGA 1700 contact plate, which again, anytime you're building with LGA 1700, it's a good idea to use the contact plate, because it helps the cooler out a little bit. What it does is it helps the contact between the cooler and the CPU, but it helps the surface of the CPU remain flat so that there's better contact to the CPU. And the better the contact, the better the cooling. So what I'm going to be doing is installing the CPU over the pins to protect the pins. There we are. I installed the CPU. Now what I'm going to do is remove these stock brackets, and I'll be replacing it with the LGA 1700 contact frame, which is this guy here, which is just going to go over the CPU and secure it. Literally all it does. But it will keep it from keep the CPU from fluctuating in any way. Well, almost any way. So if you ever need to remove the CPU, you will need this tool. And this tool will be included with your PC. So if you ever have to remove the CPU, you'll be able to do that. And you'll have the tool to do it. So we drop the contact frame all over the CPU. And then we're going to drop each of the screws into the corner holes here. And then we're going to start threading. We're going to try to do this as evenly as possible. All right. And as I said, this tool will be shipped or sent with your PC, so you'll have it with your PC. In the event that you ever have to remove the CPU, you have the tool to do it, as well as the stock brackets. Those will also be included with your build if you ever have to, for some reason, put them back on the board. All right, so next we're going to do the RAM and the SSD. And again, this is 64 gigabytes of DDR5, 6000 megahertz at CL30. And the reason why I call out CL30 is because that's your timing. Timing is important, especially with DDR5 and when you are trying to do any type of overclocking. But timing also helps with CPU performance. In my opinion, it helps a lot. It's worth it to get the better timing. Especially when you're looking for performance-based systems, better timing is always better. Yeah, I think pretty much the default for DDR5 now is CL36. We're doing CL30, so. I was told when you take stuff out or put stuff in, always screw the screws or brackets in an X motion, because it can cause uneven pressure. If you do it like you did, is there any difference on how you did it versus how I do it? So the way you're doing it is probably from here to here to here to here. I haven't noticed any difference, honestly. Being completely honest, there's, in my opinion, no difference between here, 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 and here, 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 because I'm doing it at such a small turn. I'm not like torquing each side down. I am going little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. I think that's very evenly pressured, going around the clockwise or counterclockwise or X pattern. I don't think it matters as long as you're doing it in little increments. That's, if you're doing it like torquing it, then yeah, it's going to make a big difference because you're torquing one side down. But I'm not torquing it. I'm just taking it and going a little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, and going around and around and around until it's tight, or until it's even. I try to make it as even as possible as well, which makes a huge difference because once you put the cooler on, that's where the majority of the pressure is going to be. Your cooler is what's going to be pushing the majority of the pressure out there. Yeah, just curious? No, yeah, I always welcome the questions. But for the most part, when it comes to the pressure, your pressure should be coming from your cooler. This should be snug and tight, the bracket, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, I usually do it pretty tight, but again, I just go around gently until we get there. But yeah, it probably would be safer, should I say, if I did the X pattern. And actually, when I started doing these, I did do the X pattern, but then I've, you know, tested the difference between each, and I haven't noticed a difference, honestly. There's no difference between an X or just going clockwise. Because if you do enough of these like I do, you're like, these little questions pop up, and then you gotta try it. So maybe the answer is it's maybe safer to do the X pattern, as long as, and if you're doing it counter or clockwise, you could probably do it just fine. Just do it in little increments like I did. Because I built my PC and all of the videos I watched said X motion. Meh. I guess I'm the rebel. Alright, so we're going to be installing our 980 Pro, Samsung 980 Pro, which is 2 terabytes. We're going to be putting it here in the top slot. The M.21 is usually what this is. Looks like we are going to need a stud. Too bad I'm not available. $2280. Our M.2 size. The 80. All right, and then we're going to peel our thermal pad thing off, and then put our heat spreader back on our M.2 SSD. Alright, so there we go. We got our motherboard ready to go, minus the mounting hardware for the cooler. That is a very professional way of handling the build. Thank you, sir. And welcome to the stream over on YouTube. Okay, now the SSD I left, then you left the cover off because my GPU is so massive, I couldn't keep it on. Does it affect the performance in any ways? It can, yes. So the cooler does do a significant amount of cooling on the cooler. And if the graphics card is so massive and you can't even put the... I mean, I can't even believe that, because this... what motherboard do you have? These are questions over on Twitch by Joker's Chosen. But yeah, I think if you keep the cover, which is actually a heat spreader, off the SSD, then it will impact the performance, as SSDs, just like CPUs, will thermal throttle. So if I guess you could pull up HW monitor and try to check the temperature of your SSD and see if your SSD is getting hot. And if it is, then I would definitely be concerned. Especially if you're doing a lot of read-writes. That's usually when the SSD gets hot. It's like when you're installing a game, or you're moving data from one drive to another, not from the same drive to the same drive. But if you're moving data, lots of data, or if you're installing games, any of that will really utilize the SSD, and that's where it'll start getting hot. Even installing Windows. You have the MPG, or MSI MPG X570 AM4 board. Yep. I think there's a couple in that series, the MPG. So it's either the Pro Carbon, or it's the gaming, or it's the what do you call it? They have the gaming. They have Max editions. There's all sorts of different, and there are different heat sinks on all of them. but there's a lot of MPG MSI boards. So it's MSI MPG, which is the series, and then they have the actual model, which is Carbon or Tomahawk or Bazooka or, you know, all of those. Maybe I'm thinking the wrong series, but you get what I'm saying. So whatever the model is. It also could be an Ace, could be a Godlike. There's a lot of different boards out there. But usually, especially in the MSI ones I've found, the heat spreader is not higher than the PCIe slot. And if it is, there's enough spacing there that you should be able to plug a card in. So I'm just curious, do you have like a custom water block on your card? Go ahead and get this cooler open, and then we'll get the mounting hardware for the cooler added to the motherboard before we throw it in the case. I prefer to do that because it saves me headaches later. No water block, but like my SSD is only for Windows, not games, so it runs okay. Yeah, then you're fine. I wouldn't worry about it then. So yeah, I wouldn't even worry about it if that's all you're doing with it. But the heat spreader does help. Come on. Alright, so we're going to set this aside, get the case out. However, I have 22 SSD slots, and the second SSD slot doesn't have a heat spreader, which I found weird. Not 22, 2. Okay, I was going to say 22. Holy crap, you got some PCI riser boards in there or something. The board didn't come with the second heat spreader for that second slot. Yeah, not all of them do. So that sounds like it's more like the Gaming X or the Tomahawk or Bazooka or something like that. But either way, yeah, not all of them do. Like, for example, this one doesn't either. Even on a Z790. You'll see that we have a heat spreader here, and we don't have a heat spreader for these two. No heat spreader. So it's not a requirement. But on your performance SSD or your primary SSD, you kind of do want to keep it cool, especially if it's next to the card. Usually if it's underneath the card, but in that case, if you don't have one, you don't have one, and it's fine. Don't worry about it. Wouldn't worry about it too much. All right, so I got to get this top panel off and our side panels off. All right, so we've got our mounting hardware ready to go for the motherboard. All right, I have another question. I want to get to AIO. I was looking at the NZXT 120mm AIO, but I don't have a front panel or a top panel for it. If I have a place where I could put it in the AIO, put in an AIO, so I could put the AIO in the back of the case, where the back fan slots. I've seen people do that. Okay, so number one. 120, what cooler do you have currently? That's my first question. Stock fan cooler? What CPU do you have? Second question. One that came with the Ryzen CPU. Ryzen 5 3600. All right. Well, if you ever upgrade that CPU, the 120mm AIO is not going to work. Also, the 120mm AIO is the water or the liquid in there dries up fast. Meaning within a year, your AIO is going to suck. Even on an NZXT. In fact, I don't think I've ever built a PC with a 120mm AIO because it's just been proven to be equivalent, if not worse, than a standard air cooler. So if you're going to go with a 160mm AIO, the only time you should ever do it, I guess, is in like a mini ITX super small build, like a crazy small build. If you can, if you have the space, or if you have the ability to upgrade to a better tower, or just get a better tower air cooler, I think that's better than actually going with a 120mm AIO. Or, yeah. I don't recommend the 120mm AIO at all. In fact, I think they're trash, and I don't think they should be made anymore. That's my biased opinion on that. And if you look, a lot of companies like CyberPower or other companies that build pre-built gaming PCs, all they use are 120mm AIOs. And the reason why is because they are super cheap and they don't sell well. So they get them cheap from these manufacturers and they throw them in there, and then they can call it liquid cooled, and it's not. It sucks. I just highly recommend, you know, if you're going to go with 120 millimeter AIO, go ahead and do yourself the favor for the longevity. Go look at Thermalright and their Peerless Assassin, their Peerless Assassin SE120, which is, or 120 SE, I don't remember the exact model, but it's got 6 heat pipes, 2 fans, 120 millimeter fans, and that thing can cool an i7. It can cool this right here, the i7 13700K. That on a 3600 is going to be easy. Now, the key with any cooler is your thermal paste as well. So make sure you get like a Noctua thermal paste or a Thermal Grizzly thermal paste, one of those. Even the new Deep Cool stuff, the Deep Cool 9 or whatever, they have some actually pretty good thermal paste as well. And it's pretty inexpensive. Save yourself some money. Go with the... Don't get the 120 millimeter AIO. Go with the Tower Air Cooler, and it will last longer than the 120 millimeter AIO. Sure, you plug the 120 millimeter AIO in, set it up, run it. It'll be fine. It'll run, it'll work, and it will cool. It will do its job. But over the course of time, because there's less and less liquid in there, heat destroys that liquid. It just eventually evaporates to the point where it's bone dry. And then it doesn't have enough liquid to cycle, and then it dries up. Whereas, you know, with a 240 millimeter or up, it takes way longer for that to happen because there's more liquid in the loop. That's the best way I could exploit it, is it will last longer if you go 240 or if you go with the Tower Air Cooler. That's my advice. Thank you for the advice. No problem. Yeah, I don't build with 120 millimeter AIOs. If I'm going to go 120, I'm going to save the money and just go to a Tower Air Cooler, and it's going to last longer and give me the same amount of performance. So, it's just what I've done. You can go online and, you know, watch some videos and other people's opinions on it. You don't have to take my opinion for it, but that's just my recommendation based off of my experience with 120 millimeter AIOs. I just don't build with them anymore. And I've seen way too many companies use them, and the reviews from those companies are, my PC overheats. And it's because, number one, they're using a shit case with bad airflow, but number two, a 120 millimeter AIO on an i7, which kind of sucks. Okay, I don't know why this... I don't know why that's a thing. So what I'm doing right now is just getting the cables ready so that when I put the AIO into the case, I will not have a difficult time plugging these cables in at the top of the motherboard. Because once I put that AIO into the case, it's going to be very difficult to reach in there and connect some of these cables. So I'm trying to get everything connected as good as I can beforehand. Which also means I'm going to do the power supply EPS cables as well. How effective would a regular sound card be when added to this build? I mean, sound cards aren't really a thing anymore. You really just use your onboard sound, unless you're in the audio industry, and then you're using not a sound card, but a very different setup for your sound. Hey Lexi, hope you recognize me. Yes, I do. How's it going? Joker had another question. Now I have a Asus ROG Strix 3060 12 gig, and it has a fan connectors on the graphics card. Can I use them, or should I use wire into the motherboard? I guess I'm not following. Your 3060 has connectors on the graphics card for the fans? What 3060 do you have? It's going. How about you? It's going well. Got it. Thanks. Awesome. I'm doing pretty good. I'm busy. Busy's good though. Let's see. There we go. The Asus ROG Strix, according to the website, it has fan connections. I mean, I guess maybe you could probably sync it to the motherboard, but if you're using the Asus Armory Crate or the Asus, there should be software for that card. Even MSI Afterburner should run it. So I wouldn't do that. I would just run the software to connect the card or connect to the card and change the fan curve that way, rather than physically changing the connections. And I know this case has this panel that I can pull out. According to the website, yeah. Where I got it from actually does have a place to plug fans for the PC. Okay. Kind of strange. I guess maybe if you want to add more fans to the card, maybe. Or tell the card to control different, like, for example, the NZXT H5 Flow has that fan at the bottom of the case, which is pointing fresh air directly at the graphics card. Maybe that's a fan that you would plug into that card and have the card do the run the fan speed on that fan, so that that's intake. So the graphics card would say, hey fan, I need more intake, or cooler, I need to be cooler, so it runs the fan harder. I don't know. I guess maybe that's what you would do, but at the same time, I'm doing that with the CPU already with the motherboard software, so I don't know. Never done that before. But thank you for answering my questions. I gotta run. Okay. Awesome, man. Yeah, you have a good rest of your day. Hope you have an awesome stream. Thank you, sir. Hope you have an awesome day. There was a question earlier that I missed. How effective would a regular sound card? Okay, we already answered that. So mostly the sound card, like I was saying, is nah. Only if you're in a professional audio industry would it make sense to spend money on that. And it's going to be more of an external option now than it is internal. Yeah, there are some internal options still, but I really don't see the need to do it anymore. For like home or pleasure, the onboard sound is perfectly fine. Unless your onboard sound is just that bad and you need something better, I guess go for it. But most onboard sound nowadays is just the Realtek audio, and it's more than enough. Why does it seem like that fell? I hate doing that. Pretty sure we're at 12:30. All right. CPU is almost blocked. We call it a block because it's a block of copper that we're putting on top of the CPU to cool it. There we go. CPU cooler installed. Got to run these cables through here. There we go. Beautiful. Starting to look like a PC, right? All right, let's get some of these front panel connections done for the case. All right, so we've got all our front panel connections done except for our RGB and PWM fan from our hub up here. Oh my gosh, look at all the cables. There's this guy right here. Pretty sure we have a fan connection down here. We do, and an RGB is all the way over there. That sucks. Not bad. Just weird. Like backwards than all other motherboards. Backwards compared to other motherboards. There we go. So now really we just got to plug the card in and plug the graphics card in and we can fire this bad boy up. So we're going to be putting the card in the 16 lane. You could tell that this lane here only is a 4X, not an 8X. Or I'm sorry, a 4X, not a 16X. Because of all the pins. The pins stop right there. So always put your card in the better slot. Don't put it in one of these, because you get half the bandwidth. Won't work as well. If you're spending the money on this motherboard and CPU and video card combination, you may as well get the best of it, right? I hate these packages. These packages are engineered very well. So if you look, it's all secured by a piece of plastic. So if I pull this and this, it'll release the card. So it's an engineered design. I think it's over-engineered for packaging. Simplifies things, but really, did we need all that? Just for a card. Little overkill, Asus. Little overkill. Alright, so now we're going to peel the peels off the video card. Trying to wrap this up before 12:30. I do have a meeting at 12:30. So I'm trying to finish this up before that 12:30 mark. So bear with me. Geister. There it is, the RTX 3070 inside the case, ready to go. We have a cable extension for this one as well that we're going to install. All right, let's flip it over. Now we get to do some cable management here and a power supply installation. I know this is a set or a fully modular power supply, but we're going to install all the cables. We don't want any of the cables lost for any future upgrades in the future. So we install all of the cables just so that they're there. Bless you. Wait a second. I thought this was a backdoor entry. It's not. It's a side entry. What? What? I can't wait. 1 second. I can in a minute. Okay. Finally, the power supply is installed. Took longer than I expected. Cable management. Probably the longest portion of a build. Any build. Almost done. I'm at my 12:30 meeting mark. Trying to get this build done before 12:30, which I should have been able to actually do. I'm not sure why I got delayed there. Normally I could get this done quicker. That this has to go, I don't know. This needs to be the pump. What does this go to? I'm so confused by this. This connection type is beyond stupid. Okay, so we'll take the RGB connection. Plug it into this thing, right? No, absolutely not. So what does this do? Literally, what does this do? This goes to something. Okay, I need to go through this documentation and figure out how exactly all this plugs in with Leon Lee, because they have to be so unique and special. Nothing can be the same. help if I minimize that too. Mm-hmm. This, where does this go? It has no indication about this. This, which comes from the pump, there's nothing. This is our pump header, I'm assuming. I have no idea. Oh, God. Don't know what you are? You're gone. Pump. CPU fan. Okay, so that's my fans. Now what about my RGB? Because I have this thing, which makes absolutely no sense at all. I mean, how does that go back to that? I guess I'm missing a connection here? That. Okay. I have this. And that. Again. How does it get back there? Unless this goes to this, which is absolutely retarded. It does not. None of this makes any sense whatsoever. That's frustrating. Other than this PWM pump connection and the CPU fan connection, those are about the only two things that make any sense right here. The rest of it doesn't add up to the actual instructions, Leon Lee. I've used your performance coolers, and they're super easy to install. Once you get into the RGB ones, it's kind of confusing. I don't know how many PCs I built. This should not be this confusing. Like, if I was buying this personally for myself to enjoy building PCs, I would have taken this thing back and said, this is too confusing. As somebody who doesn't want to think a lot while they're building. Apparently I cut myself. Now I'm back to square one where I don't understand how this and this connect. And it doesn't explain it here at all. Nothing. This somehow goes to the adapter, which somehow goes to... But this adapter is not the right connection. That's frustrating. It's not the connection that they list inside the none of these cables work. Am I missing something? Nope. There's supposedly a cable. You gotta be fucking kidding. There it is. Never mind. Found it. Dumb, but found it. Dumb design. That's all I gotta say. And more cables that have to run through the center of the case. Dumb. Once again, dumb. So, Leon Lee. Minimize cables. More cables by minimizing cables. So, we're gonna have to review that. Anyway, sorry. Little frustration there with the design by Leon Lee. It's my first time building with this particular cooler, the RGB version of it. The non-RGB version is actually super easy to work with, and I love it. Same performance, just non-RGB and RGB. Okay, and then the last thing we got to do is remove this actually because we're not using it. Plug this guy into a USB header. Should be right here. Wow. All this extra crap, not even needed. But came with it. Made it look like it was supposed to be used. The instructions are very confusing. They should have different scenarios listed out, I guess. Be my recommendation there. Should have spent more time with the cooler before I put it in there. Play around with the connections and figure it out. That's what I should have done, instead of getting frustrated with it. Okay, but still, design from Lian Li was not very simple. Not simple to understand, anyway. Oh. All right, let's plug her in and fire it up and see what it looks like, right? See if I built the PC correctly, right? Yeah. Are we doing Windows 11? Windows 10. We're going Windows 10. Here we go. Might be helpful to find the power button. DDR5 RAM training, all the best for your meeting. Oh, thanks. I actually asked them if we could push the meeting back. I didn't look yet, so don't worry about it. Want to get your build finished, man. So I don't think the RGB on the fans are going to turn on up here until we get to the software. Yeah. Plus, yeah, I think we got to get to the software before that turns on. So, until then, we are RGB-less on the top and the cooler. But we'll get there. I gotta load all that up and finish it. But there it is, up and running, and it's actually posted. We have a Z790p Wi-Fi motherboard with a an Intel i7 13700K with 64 gigs of DDR5 RAM. And the 980 Pro is showing up with 2 terabytes, and we are ready to run Windows. So let's go ahead and get started with that. But honestly, the stream's I'm probably going to end the stream here. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the software side of this and then do some testing with it. So I'll keep you posted on whether or not we're going to be able to get it over to you today. But it is up and running. It's built. Look at that. I can't move it any further over because the power cord won't reach. And this isn't my standard camera that I normally use for streaming. My Logitech Rally died on me, and Logitech is sending me a replacement. I got them to send me a replacement. Yay! So, anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the stream. And, Abby, I hope you enjoy your PC. Looking forward to getting it to you so you can run it and play it, use it, and enjoy it. I will get all the software stuff here done, and I'll keep in contact with getting it out to you. Then later this week, we are planning more build streams. We have more streams later this week. So I believe we have one tomorrow and also Wednesday. So if you enjoyed this kind of stuff, make sure you hang out. Thanks again, everybody. I appreciate everybody hanging out for the day. I'll see you next time.